Welcome to Talk Dizzy to Me, the show that brings you a comprehensive look into the complex field of dizziness. Now here are your hosts, vestibular physical therapist Dr. Abby Ross and Dr. Danielle Tolman.
Welcome back, everyone, to Talk Dizzy to Me. My name is Dr. Abby Ross with my co-host, Dr. Danielle Tolman. We're both vestibular physical therapists, and we have a really fun segment today. It's Friday afternoon. This will be the first of, we hope, many, because we brought our friend Karen Tartt back. She's a bartender. She's going to talk us through a migraine-friendly cocktail. And on today's show, we also have the host of our new segment called Unsteady and Unfiltered, Christine Moyer. Welcome, everybody. Karen, thank you for joining us. What is today's cocktail called, and what was the inspiration for it?
Today's cocktail was called Witch's Castle. I made it for a pop-up I did when I was launching my consulting firm. It is based off of one of my favorite hiking spots outside of Portland. I visited the city I love going to Portland. It's gorgeous there. It's beautiful. But I visited the city one time. I was going through like a really horrible breakup, and I have a really good friend that was living in the city at the time. And she took me to Witch's Castle, and it was kind of just a really just beautiful space to kind of just relax and like take in the area. It was like so green and so lush. And I remember like the air just smelled like like Christmas, like clean Christmas. And so this cocktail was meant to feel effervescent through the soda because the air there just felt like really lifting. The herbal sort of structure behind this with the rosemary, the thyme, and the bay leaves were kind of all to sort of emulate the feeling of like being around all those like fir trees and evergreens. And the pear aspect, because one of my favorite pear brandy distilleries is right outside of Portland. Yeah.
Well, it's very exciting. We had a little bit of a learning curve when it came to preparing this cocktail because I had no idea what a shrub was. Could you describe that a little bit and just talk about what that does for the cocktail?
Yeah. So this shrubs were an interesting, easy way for me to originally get around the way of using no citrus when using acid in a cocktail. You have to have acid to balance out sweet when it comes to building a drink. You really want to think about a drink being a complete package. So where you have like the sweeter from the sugar and the pear, and you have the herbal aspect, the souring aspect comes from the vinegar. And so shrubs were originally a way that folks used to preserve fruits, like back before we had refrigeration, things that were shelf stable. The addition of vinegar and sugar helped create like a shelf stable liquid essentially that you could use to make these drinks that people would use to sort of enjoy fruits when they were off season.
Very cool. So go ahead, Abby.
I was going to say, that's amazing. And I, too, was new to the word shrub. And I do believe Christine as well was new to the word shrub. She had, when we were recruiting her to come on today's podcast, she was making jokes about that word, calling it the bush. She just finished her bush on the stove, so she's ready to go for today. But yeah, Rob, I've learned all sorts of new things, but tell us about the ingredients that you chose specifically for this cocktail and what makes them migraine-friendly.
So when I make migraine-friendly cocktail, like I really want to lean into the things that are good for us. So I think about building flavor first. So when we build flavor, like the herbal aspect, I wanted to make sure that each thing was safe for us, which the herbs that we select were fine. Pears, there's been pretty interesting evidence to suggest that pears actually can help alleviate hangover symptoms. There's been promising evidence as far as like ingesting it beforehand. And so I kind of thought it would be cheeky and fun to put it together. I want to say like 8 or 9 years ago, like people that were distilling and using pears like to create spirits were kind of using that as like a tagline, like, oh, like pears are great for you because of this reason. But like the evidence was there when it came to like actual like fresh pears and like the juice. So that became sort of an interesting way to highlight an ingredient that may be beneficial for us.
Very cool. Now you mentioned skipping the citrus because citrus can be a trigger. Are there any triggers that people might want to look out for when they're ordering drinks like out at the bar, things like that could be hidden in their cocktail that they would traditionally order?
Yeah, so the main component that we're looking at in citrus that's problematic is histamine. So when we talk about things like one of the spirited recommendations that I have for this cocktail being gin. Gin plays so nicely with these like really beautiful herbal flavors. You'll see within a lot of those botanical builds like citrus peels and things like that, or whole fruits. Like that's pretty common. The histamine particle, to the best of my knowledge, and as I've read through like texts and like through information I've exchanged through like honestly through like professors, like you can actually like major in some of these things. So like I've been very fortunate to have been in contact with some folks that study enology, which is like kind of like the study of wine and like how that's created, that I've been able to exchange information. To the best of my knowledge, it's been explained to me and shown to me through different research articles that histamine is too large of a particle, much like gluten, to go through distillation. And so when you look at things like leaning into like spirits that have like that zestier component you're looking for, it kind of creates this avenue for you to get around the problematic particle. So like when you're ordering at a restaurant or a bar, you look at house-made ingredients and you ask them, like you can ask them what are the ingredients that are in this, or you can tell them, like I'll approach it one of two ways. If, because I don't need the learning curve of, I can decipher a menu. I've built a menu. I can read behind the lines. I can kind of see, like, I know the questions to ask. So that's maybe an advantage that I have here. But if you see a house-made ingredient that you don't know, always ask, because there could be an ingredient there that's hiding. Like I always preface when I order a martini, like, hey, I have a citrus sensitivity. That's usually like how I explain that. And there are some places, because I usually will go with an olive. That's a pretty common, like pretty safe garnish or like ingredient that I can use. There's some places that will marinate theirs in citrus, and it gives them a second to say, hey, this is not going to be a good option for you. Or within the asking, I found other things that work out really nicely too. Like I had never had a caperberry before that. And through like looking at my own information and knowledge online, caperberries work out really, or fit really beautifully within the diet. And they're like really zesty and delicious. So like, even in asking, like you may find something that works out really nicely for you that you've never had before. So that would be sort of my tell there.
That's great. Now, we're going to get into today's ingredients in a moment because we're all going to make our own drink. However, we might be making our drinks slightly differently. Can you talk to me about whether this can be a non-alcoholic version, and also what spirits you do recommend to go with this type of pairing?
Mm-hmm. So this cocktail is really versatile in the components that it has soda, which we'll use to dilute the ingredients. So like the shrub that we made is like high in sugar, acid, there's the fruit and herbal components. You can increase that, decrease that to your own liking. If you're looking for a lower sugar, like less intense experience, you can use less of it and use more soda, and vice versa. I served this over ice, and I typically will enjoy this over ice. Some people, the ice versus not ice with a chilled soda can be sort of, completely up to your discretion. When it comes to accounting for dilution, though, if you're not using ice, I would certainly consider maybe using more soda, because you want to look at like the whole weight of the cocktail. Like how much of that weight is like spirit versus like mixer versus like soda. For the measurements that I put through, I think for the recipe that I sent you, if it's a 40% spirit and you're using 1.25 ounces of it, and the total volume is around 8 to 9 ounces, you're looking around like 4.5% for the whole drink, which is about what you get like in an average beer. So if you're considering like how you're pacing yourself, like proof wise, alcohol wise, like, and you want to have that sort of mindset, like there are resources out there for that. One of my favorites is Omni Calculator, OMNI. It's a scientific website that specializes in measurements, but I really love their alcohol dilution calculator, because it helps me, like when I'm designing, think about, okay, like what is that experience going to feel like to a person? Are you having an NA cocktail where you're not having anything in it, or am I having an afternoon where I want to have a drink, but I want it to be nice and light because it's afternoon and I'm not the biggest daytime drinker, so maybe I want something that's closer to like 4%. Those kinds of resources are there to help me figure out like what that dosing, essentially, if you want to call it that, should be.
So we could use gin. Could we use vodka or tequila?
Yes. If you were going to use anything, I'd say clear. Vodka and Blanco tequila are the spirited recommendations that come through in most of the migraine diet text. I would also include with that gin. I also think that some of the sugarcane spirits that are legally protected that we talked about in the other segment would fit beautifully in this as well. Like I think this would be really tasty with something that has like more of like an earth. I don't know, if you get into things like agricole or like cachaça, there's this like earthiness to it. There's this smunkiness to it that I think would pair really nicely with like the herbal quality in this. When you think about what flavors you want to highlight, I'd sort of focus on that. You mentioned Blanco tequila in one of our earlier conversations about this. And like that like green pepper, sort of like interesting note that you get from a lot of Blanco tequilas, I could also see playing really nicely with herbs in this.
Very cool. Well, shall we dig into creating our cocktail, which I have already failed at because I just noticed that my gin does have limes in it. So I've already failed the citrus migraine aspect of all of this. So
you're fine with gray well because it's not in the secondary process. It goes through distillation, so you're fine. That was the note that I made earlier. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I love gray whale in a martini. It's delicious. It's very interesting. The botanicals they've selected in that follow. I don't work for them for context. I just think it's really cool and interesting. The botanicals they've selected in that specifically follow the migration pattern of the gray whale. So if you notice like the locations they put underneath each botanical, that's like the note that that's the distinction that they've like decided is important to them.
Well, very cool. Well, Gray Whale, if you ever wanted to sponsor us and send us some free product, I would not be opposed. Just putting it out there.
Yeah.
We'll take two of those, please. One for each of us.
Yeah, we're not going to share.
All right, Karen, for this, what do we do first?
Okay, if you wanted to start with your shrub, that would be a good place to start. I'm going to go ahead and put 2 ounces. I have a larger glass with like bigger, chunkier ice cubes, so I'm going to go ahead and give myself 2 ounces.
And can you bring our audience up to speed on how we prepared this shrub?
Yes. So we started out with a simple pear juice. The note that I made about the juice being that the one I selected has ascorbic acid, which is essentially like powdered vitamin C. It's a color protectant. Because there are some other sources out there that have like lemon juice to use basically help protect the color. It's pretty common. But we started out with the juice. We added into it sugar to make a light syrup, and then we steeped the herbs in it. And when you steep the herbs in it, you should get a lot of like fragrance off the heat. Like you shouldn't boil it for a very long time because it'll start to concentrate. And basically everything just steeps. You cool it, you put it into a sealable container, you store it in the fridge overnight, and then or for several hours, whatever you feel. And then the next day you strain it to get all those solids out. You basically want those little pieces from like the thyme and the rosemary that have had, time to steep in the cocktail syrup, if you will. You want them out because you don't want them in your drink. And you should get this like golden sort of like, it should have this like golden appearance to it.
So shrub was a new word for me. Steep is also a new word, and I don't know if that makes me a bad cook as well, but can you define that word as well?
Yeah, steep would be more for maybe teas. Steeping is just like when you're soaking something in very hot water. And like steeping honestly there's a grade for them. Steeping is just as simple as like putting a tea bag into hot water. You can get into things like a more technical term for like if you're steeping something that's like a woody substance for a long time over like a low, like long heat, that's called a decoction because you're wanting to extract as much material out of that as you can. It just depends on what your thought is, what you're trying to achieve. But steeping is just meant to be like like the heat on this is short. It's not going to stay on there for a long time. Yeah.
Not a tea girl, not a coffee girl, but I am a gin girl. So let's continue.
Yes. Oh my God. This is exciting. Okay. So we've got our syrup, and then you can measure at this point, like whatever syrup you want to use or not use. I have one that I can use today. This one is one I talked about, a sugarcane spirit. This one is unaged. Cachaça is Brazilian, so that's fun. This one has some of those like funky notes that I was like talking about. Because this one is bar strength, it's a little bit higher. It's 43%. So that was kind of the note that I made about that. You may find some gins are a little bit higher because some distillers choose that for their flavor profile. So instead of using 1.25 ounces, I'll go ahead and use just 1 ounce to get me closer to that like lower ABV that we were speaking about. At this point, you also may decide, because like the ice will melt a little bit, that you need another cube. Or you may decide that you want to add more soda if you want like a less intense experience. That's completely up to you.
Like if this is your first cocktail postpartum after not drinking for nearly a year, yes, a little bit of a lighter touch would be good in this situation. I
kind of like really want to also like what a huge privilege. Thank you. Like, wow, what a compliment.
Well,
wow.
Thank you. I feel like we were being very classy with our drink choice. This is a great way to kick this back off, I have to say.
And then when it comes to sodas, Because like when I was speaking earlier about zebra striping, one of my favorite drinks to do that with is a really high bubble soda. One of my favorites is like a Topo Chico. I love that like bitey quality of like a Topo Chico. Like Pellegrino is just a little bit too soft for me. So when it comes to like picking the drink that goes in between your drinks, make it interesting. Like this to me is interesting.
Do you want to also define zebra striping? Because that was another new term for me. Today is Go
Yes.
Friday.
Yes. Okay. So zebra striping is a newer term that we're using in industry that essentially fits the profile of like a low to no drinker, someone who doesn't drink all the time, maybe chooses to drink on certain occasions, chooses to not imbibe on certain occasions. But zebra striping is essentially like you will have an alcoholic beverage, have a non-alcoholic beverage, and then choose to like sort of stagger yourself that way. And like the drinks in between should be just in my professional and personal opinion should be just as interesting, if maybe not more so than the alcoholic drinks you're consuming, if you're the person that cares about or is caring about your health, is trying to enjoy a social experience responsibly, without causing yourself that much harm. Yeah, so that's a newer term that you'll see hopefully come up. It comes up a lot in uh, basically our side of things, like in industry classes, like write-ups. You look at like publications like Punch, Imbibe, all embracing things like zebra striping. When NA cocktail sort of became a thing, the low to no crowd grew, and I would maybe consider myself to be part of that group now. Like I don't always choose to drink when I go out, or when I do, it is like with a really nice soda in between, or I'm going to the place that has like my favorite snack and I'm taking a break and being very present and being very mindful of like what I'm enjoying in that moment in between the martinis.
You're honestly making me want to go out tonight. So
Yes, I'm
just-
doing service in a little bit. My Friday crowd. I love everyone. No one is more excited to see the bartender than like on a Friday night. Like wow.
I was just about to say, I love that everybody here assumes that I even leave my house. Like, that's great. Because you're like, when you go out, I'm like, I don't go anywhere.
Well, the good thing about these is some of these, like this one is very batchable. If you were the kind of person that likes to stay at home and you're like, as I love my job, I love what I do for a living, but I'm not the biggest host when it comes to my house. And that's like, I don't know, like it's maybe like kind of weird. I'm not the best the host, in my home. But if you're the kind of person that likes doing that, this is a really batchable, really easy cocktail that is kind of a crowd pleaser because it can cater to many people. Like when you consider like you can make this in I've made versions of cocktails similar to this actually for my friends' kids like quinceanera before. Like I made like a pomegranate version of like a cocktail similar to this. Like you could sort of like make this in many different scenarios in many different ways if you wanted to, if you were the kind of person that wanted to host something in your home.
No, I don't have friends either.
Listen, there's nothing wrong with hanging out at home too and enjoying the nice weather that's going to be coming in, like hanging out on the outside, on the porch, the deck, whatever, having a cocktail. This sounds like a perfect way to end a Friday night to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
With an infant, we are not going out anywhere either. So I will say my husband and I will be probably drinking the rest of this later tonight.
Yes.
I have a 12-year-old and I'm not going anywhere. Also, you said sugarcane spirit. I think I didn't follow the directions on that. So can you explain that? Because I just got this vodka and I got it
Oh,
because it says
yeah.
it's organic.
Yeah, that's completely
So,
fine. Vodka is totally fine. So
okay.
within my hope to build on the category of what I consider like migraine friendly, I am doing a lot of research and doing a lot of considering of what would chemically be present in some of these things. So like within sugarcane spirits, you have these like legally protected, like a lot of countries will like legally protect the spirits that they produce that are like sugarcane, for example, like cachaça, Brazil, the unaged qualities of like a silver, like fit the spectrum of what I believe like a Blanco tequila and like a vodka fit. I also believe things like mezcal fit. Mezcal missed its getting its like legal definition by like 2 or 3 years after the migraine diet was first published. So I think that was like the first sort of clue for me. I was like, okay, like actually the history and the laws can help us figure this out here. It can give us the clues that we need to fit the profile. And so like what I've been doing is studying these really interesting, fun, nerdy charts. They're called chromatograms. Chromatograms we use for like everything household. Your Dawn dish soap, your house cleaner, your like the Belvedere you have in your hand, that company like pays for like someone to test it chemically. So they get something called a chromatogram that basically spits out a chart that tells them to like the tiniest amount, like the things that are chemically present. And so what I've been doing is studying those for different spirits and seeing what's present versus what's not, because I would like to be able to compile enough evidence to more clearly define what that means and more clearly define what that means, like with actual like evidence that people can see. Because I can speak as much as I want about my personal experience drinking these and like understanding and knowing what that means for me socially to like relax and not worry about what I'm consuming and just sort of be a real human for a moment. And just, you know, because inevitably like we do get better when the stress comes off, and there is something very nice about just having a drink and talking with a friend no matter where you are. And so
Vibing.
yes, absolutely, completely. Oh my God, yeah. And even creatively, like I have this conversation with folks sometimes. It's like I am better creatively when I like am able to like have these conversations and talks with people. Like being in service makes me more creative. Is it the talk that I have with someone that's asking me for a certain drink? Like yes, but also it's understanding that life is a very human experience, and like depending on what your sort of take on what joy is, like putting joy into a glass, putting joy into a talk, putting joy into like asking someone how their day is just incredibly meaningful. And I think that's just for me, drinks like what a very human experience is like. And so if anything, like I'm not the biggest, like I would never like studied science in that regard. Like this has definitely been like a huge learning curve for me. It's been a lot of contacting professors. It's been a lot of like planning trips to hopefully go visit a lab this spring that's been very kind to offer to host me to like test some of my spirits out, because I also like within making citrus substitutes, I've been doing what's called studying those chromatograms and basically making what's called a hydrosol, which is like a fancy term also for distilled water. Some of your NA spirits that you see are hydrosols. And so you basically distill water with botanicals in order to like get the essence of those flavors into them. So I've been kind of reverse engineering my citrus substitutes that way. So I'll take a lemon chromatogram and look at what's present, and then look at other organic materials like hops, for example. Like I've been studying a lot of hops from beer and using those to like sort of synthesize what a true citrus like profile would look like for like lemon, lime. I have pineapple. I also recently did a grapefruit last year that I was very proud of, because grapefruit not only affects the migraine community, it affects a lot of folks that deal with medical issues, folks that are on like, you know, like Lipitor, things like that. Folks that are grapefruit, to the best of my knowledge, also can affect like contraceptives, like things like that. Like it can affect a lot of different medications. And so like for me, it's like, okay, like this is a really creative, like nerdy way to get around it, but it's like, how do you make it taste good? So that's kind of like what the motivation behind that is.
Cool.
Your passion and knowledge is out of this world. I've never learned so much about alcohol. And honestly, I wish I had this experience when I was younger, because I feel like I could have saved myself plenty of hangovers. I could have taken my time. But on that note, I think it's time to break out of hibernation.
Yes.
We added our shrub, we added our liquor, we added our
Ice.
Time for soda.
now we add our soda water.
Okay.
You also might want to give this a little stir if you're using a straw, or if you live in California, you could have no plastic straws. I'm like terrified of metal straws. I know that's a weird thing to admit as a bartender, but like I'm terrified of metal straws.
We've got our little plastic flamingo stir and the
I made a huge mess.
Right.
And then you can garnish with herbs if you want. If you have leftover herbs, you can garnish with them. When I did this for my pop-up, I took the bay leaves and wrapped them around, like made like a little bouquet with the rosemary and the thyme. You can also just use some simple pear slices if you wanted to. So like I just took some like simple like poached pear and then just made them like really thin, like beautiful slices. And you can just tuck them in the top like that if you want. And it can just kind of hang out on the side for you.
That's me.
Yeah. Karen, you have the best, I feel, mindset. And in our last episode and in this episode, you've said some really profound things. So I'm going to put the pressure on you. Danny, did you think the same thing? Was this what you were about to do?
Yeah, to what? To toast?
Have Karen give us a nice toast.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, my favorite thing to say to people in service is usually just be good or be good at it.
I like it.
Okay, amen. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, wow. That's really good.
Oh my gosh.
That's really good.
That's really good. It tastes
Thank
like Christmas at the beach.
Well, I'll take that. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So good. Like you can smell and taste the Christmas, but it's tropical. It's really good.
I'll be honest, when I saw the ingredient list, I did not expect to like it as much as I do. Like I would order this again and again. Like I really, really like this.
Oh, yeah.
Looking at the ingredients, I probably would have passed over it if I had to choose, making it. I was like, this will be interesting. But no, this is amazing. This is really great. Oh,
That's
this is
so awesome. Thanks.
Thank
Oh
you
my
so
God. And your first drink.
And it's my first drink.
Yay! Also, I can see how this would be a real crowd pleaser because it does have that. It has like the best of both worlds. I feel like mixed into it. Good job, nice choice, Karen.
Thank you. Yeah, this one was so much fun. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you putting everything together. And if anybody's watching this before they've watched Karen's episode, you need to go back and watch the whole thing. Because that was a really, really great recording that we had yesterday, and we're really, really excited to have you on. And thank you so much for putting together such a great cocktail. And Christine, thanks for joining us too. We're so excited to have you.
Absolutely. Thanks for letting me spend my Friday afternoon with you guys. It was a wild week, and so this was a perfect way to end it.
Oh, amazing.
And I love your passion. Like it just radiates out of you. And I love, there's nothing more in this world than I love than when somebody nerds out on something that they are super passionate about. And it like totally gets me hyped. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us.
It reminds me of a term that Danny coined, vestibuloholic. So of course alcoholic, but vestibuloholic is what we are, what we all are. We're so passionate about learning, educating, treating anything vestibular, and cheers to being vestibuloholics. Audience, thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend, Monday afternoon, whatever it is you're enjoying this. Cheers.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition.
The content of this podcast is based on general knowledge and information available up until the recording of this specific episode. Medical knowledge and practices may evolve over time, and new information may emerge that could change the understanding or treatment of vestibular dysfunction. It is important to consult a qualified healthcare professional for the most up-to-date and personalized advice.
The information provided in this podcast is meant to complement, not replace, the relationship that exists between a patient and their healthcare provider. It is intended to empower patients with knowledge about vestibular dysfunction and its management, but individual cases may vary, and treatment approaches should be tailored to each patient's unique circumstances.
By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and agree to the terms of this medical disclaimer. The organizers, presenters, and creators of this podcast are not liable for any actions or decisions taken by individuals based on the information presented herein. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider for medical advice and treatment.